Good morning, everyone. This is Valerie Gupte from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting virtual session in partnership with SAP. Today's topic is going to be bridging the employee experience gap. People Matters in association with SAP brings you to a series of virtual learning sessions this quarter, focusing on employee experience, performance management, and compensation and benefits. This first session in our series will address some of the gaps that are experienced by HR leaders while creating a great employee experience. The employee experience journey is one of the most vital ones for any organization. The technology gap, the culture gap, the readiness gap, leadership, design, and the execution gap are some of the gaps that have been identified while designing this employee experience. For sharing his expert views today, we have with us Rajesh Lele. He's the General Manager, Process Operations, hired to retire at Tata Motors. Hi, Rajesh. It's wonderful to have you here.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for having me over here, People Matters team and the rest of the people who are listening. Thank you.
We're glad to have you here, Rajesh. To tell you all a little bit about our speaker for the day, he is an HR professional with specialization in digital HR analytics, HR shared services, and technology-enabled HR transformation. He has an experience of more than 28 years in deploying HR technology platforms and processes across the HR life circle. These processes affect recruitment, onboarding, performance, learning, compensation, and enterprise social and collaboration. So thank you, Rajesh, for joining us over here. So before we move ahead, there are some important tasks that I would like for everyone to note. Basically, we have time set aside for everybody to send in their questions. So during the webinar, anybody who has any sort of questions, please comment, and we'll try to take as many questions as time allows us. So I would like to share a little bit about the topic that we have for today, that is the employee experience. And I would also like to invite Rajesh to shed some light on the different kinds of gaps and gaps in the employee experience journey and how HR leaders can effectively design the employee experience journey. Over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Valerie, and once again, welcome everybody. Just a very quick reminder: there is a chat option which is available, so please put your questions in, because I will be just walking you through some of the conceptual anchors around what I have learned as employee experience. And while the PowerPoint is on, I may not be able to see the chat comments, but we will come back to it towards the middle of the session, and then start looking at the Q&A in earnest. So with that said, I will just give me a moment to share my screen. And I hope this is visible. Valerie, you can give me an okay.
Yes, you can see the screen, definitely.
Great. Right. So what do we mean by experience? Now, this word has kind of taken or is being bandied about a lot in maybe the last year and a half or so. And I think some of the software or the HCM vendors have started talking about the fact that that we need to start treating employees as customers, or and therefore how employees experience the organization is getting to be more important and going beyond things like engagement and satisfaction. So what are some of the areas and what are some of the concerns that we could we could look at? However, just to set the context over here, there is a saying which says that there is nothing new in the world, just old things experienced by new people. Okay, So when I began my career, we used to call this employee satisfaction. It then metamorphosed into employee engagement, and how do people give an incremental effort or discretionary effort to the organization, which is now kind of getting metamorphosed into the employee experience paradigm, which says that how is an employee experiencing the organization that will lead to greater productivity and benefits and growth both for the employee and for the organization together. So let's have a look at some of these, conceptual anchors that are there. I don't have too much in terms of data or statistics, but just the bare principles in terms of what do we mean by employee experience, what are the gaps that as HR professionals we need to look at, and of course followed by the Q&A that we are looking at. So, how would you define experience? And of course, when we talk about leave aside employee experience, how do we experience anything? How do I experience, for example, the mobile phone that I may have bought recently, or how do I experience going to the stadium to watch a cricket match or a football match? Because here, if you just think back on those experiences, you will realize that we use this in our everyday walk, and we say that, look, ultimately the experience of watching a cricket match in my home is better than going to the stadium and watching it. Or some of you may feel that, oh no, actually there is a completely different experience that you get when you go to the stadium as against watching it at home. So different people, there are different things which impact as far as the experience is concerned. So if I were to kind of summarize, or if I were to kind of help define this, and the way the Oxford Dictionary defines experience, it's in two factors on the left hand side. First is the practical contact with an observation of facts or events. Now this is a very sterile and a very bland description of that. So practical contact with the stadium and watching the cricket match, or practical contact of an employee in the processes that are HR processes that the organization has. If I look at the second definition, it talks about an event or occurrence which leaves an impression on someone. And this is where we get closer to uncovering or unraveling the paradigm of employee experience. Because ultimately, all experiences leave us with some impression or the other. At the end of this seminar, hopefully your experience with the platform that is there, or with People Matters, or with me, will hopefully be good for you to want to come back. Okay. So ultimately, when we talk about experience, it is an event or it's an occurrence which leaves an impression on someone. And through the employee experience paradigm, what we are looking to see is how can we create a positive experience for the employees every time they encounter an organization. Okay. Now, earlier, this used to be very simply called in colloquial terms where the rubber hits the road. Right. So that's very simply putting it. Ultimately, what does an employee do? What does the employee's manager do? What does HR do? What does the business leadership do? All of it that goes and form what, from a customer experience angle, was called moments of truth many years back. So what are the moments of truth that an employee experiences? And that's what we will look at. Valerie, sorry, there seems to be an echo. I hope everybody else is on mute in terms of their...
Yes, everyone's on mute. So we can hear you clearly. No problem.
Thank you. Okay. So what are these moments of truth that an employee experiences? Okay. Where does the rubber hit the road? If we look at the life cycle, does the rubber hit the road in the hiring and onboarding process? That's where we make our strongest pitch to woo the candidate, right? We say that our organizations are the best thing to happen to humanity since sliced bread. We say that if you come here, you won't have to go anywhere else. We say a lot in the hiring process to make sure that we have the right candidate on board. And I'm not saying that we lie. We genuinely believe that. We genuinely believe that people will get a positive experience as a result of joining our respective organizations. But there are several moments in the hiring process when the rubber hits the road and there is a burning smell that comes out. Uh, for instance, I was at the People Matters Talent Acquisition Conference sometime last year, and one of the things that we were discussing was on the talent acquisition technology and what are some of the areas that talent acquisition as a function needs to look at. And some of the things were simple things like uh, do our interviews get conducted on time? Do people actually come for the interview? I mean, and I'm talking about from the organizational perspective. When they say they will come for the interview, are they prepared for having those interviews? So this is some of the areas where we don't realize it as HR leaders or as business leaders, but we are actually creating an impression or a positive or a negative experience for the candidate, and that is what they are likely to carry into their jobs right from the first stage itself. So this is one area. Obviously, the second area is learning and development. When you hire an employee and you onboard their employee, they are put through some training programs, maybe their induction program, or maybe some aspects of functional programs or functional areas where they need to catch up with. You would probably put them through some mandatory courses around rules, regulations, guides of the organization, values, etc. So all of that are also points where the experience matters. How is it that they are actually asked to attend a program? Does their manager prepare them as to what they should expect out of the program? Does the manager prepare them for a perspective to say that after you come back, what should be the areas that you should be working on? And does the manager actually do that? How does HR enable that? So again, these are areas that we look at where the employee experience can be enhanced overall. The famous or infamous performance management. We all have done chase ups on the business in terms of finish your goal sheets, enter it in the system, submit it on time, finish your appraisals, midterm reviews, and update it on time, finish your final appraisals. We need to do the normalization, all of that aspects, and then giving the feedback back to the employee. Now, the question is, how good or how effective are these discussions around goal setting, around the reviews? How frequent are they? What does the employee experience in this appraisal or the performance management process? Again, huge takeaways from here. At the end of the review and the appraisal process, does the employee come back with a feeling that I didn't get anything concrete out of it? Or does the employee come back and say that, oh, my manager is not willing to listen to what I have to say? Or does the employee feel good and say that, look, I know I didn't do all that well or all that great this year. It's good that my manager has given me consistent and candid feedback, and I know which are the areas that I need to improve on. Now, even if that is the case, that is a positive experience as far as the employee is concerned, rather than not giving the feedback, etc. So this is some of the areas where performance management, the rubber hits the road. Talent and succession. Of course, we want to find out the best talent. So we conduct different ways, different processes through which we are unearthing talent, which the organization, which will serve the organization in the future. So we do assessment centers, we do psychometric tests, we do a combination of all of that. And we say that, okay, here is a certain talent pool. Now what? How do they experience being in or being out of the talent pool? What happens to people who don't make it to the talent pool? What is their experience, not just of that process, but their ongoing commitment to the organization in their current roles or the roles that they need to then continue and work on? So that's the other dimension where we need to look at. Employee engagement. Of course, again, much has been said about this aspect, but if we just come to the fact that we define engagement as the incremental effort that an employee puts in, where does the rubber hit the road for that? How is the aspects of work-life balance being factored in over here. How does the employee know that putting in an incremental effort will lead to some gain, even if it is a new skill or even if it is a stretch assignment, that they will gain as a result of them being developed and being better corporate citizens as a result of that? Okay. And the next one is, of course, compensation and benefits. Here again, what are the kind of policies do we have? What are the kind of benefits are we offering the workforce? Have we done an analysis in terms of the demographics of our workforce and what kind of benefits would they actually like? And are they in line with something which, let's say, if my workforce is a young workforce or predominantly uh, 35 and under, what kind of benefits would appeal to them? Would they be long-term benefits that I would give them, or would they be something which they can consume in the moment or on a short-term basis? So these are the areas again which the employee may experience positively or negatively to have a look at that. And finally, employee services. And this comes down to things like how quickly can I get my claims resolved? Do I need 5 degrees of approval for getting something done in the organization? How flexible or how agile is my organization? So a lot of this comes down to the way we want to look at our employees and service these employees as I said earlier, as we would service our customers. So with these small nuggets of inputs, what we see is there is no place to hide as far as HR is concerned from an employee experience perspective. Each area of or each function or each COE will have its own moments of truth that the employee experience will matter, and it is up to us to understand how is it that we are able to take this and create that positive impression each time after time, month after month, year after year for the employee to while he or she is there in the organization. And therefore, which brings us to some of the gaps that we need to look at. That when the rubber hits the road, do we hear a screeching sound and a burning smell, or do we get a smooth ride? And apologies for the automotive metaphors, but you know where I come from, so I couldn't help doing that. Right. So when we look at the gaps, there are about 6 gaps that we can we could identify in some of these areas. First and foremost is the leadership gap, and it doesn't take much, but it just takes a few senior people to realize that employee experience is something that we really want to look at. We want to make sure that our employees are treated right. We want to make sure that while we are giving the benefits which are contemporary and relevant, it is actually meeting the needs of the employees. We should be able to realize that our processes should be quick, nimble, and not put the employees through unnecessary difficulty or bureaucratic approaches in that sense. So that's where the leadership matters. The biggest or one of the biggest pieces personally that I've experienced is a culture that goes into understanding what employee experience is all about. A culture of orientation of the people to make sure that we don't look at people as a commodity. Uh, and at least in a lot of Indian organizations that I'm not necessarily worked with, but I have colleagues and friends across that. There is a sense that look, if the person is not willing to do what the boss says, then there are other people out there who are more than happy to have a job and take over that position. Now, that's not the orientation to people that we need to have. We need to have an orientation to people that says, okay, while you are here, however short or long a while you may be here, I need to ensure that that you are able to give your best to the organization, and that I'm able to give, as an organization, I'm able to give my best to you. and which is what comes to the second point, that is the orientation to people. So it's not about people being a commodity, but it is about people being human beings, that we need to look at them that way and see how is it that we can balance the need that people have with what the organization can give. But at the same time, there is a certain tension over here, where, and that brings me to the third point, that third bullet point in the culture, where we don't necessarily then have to be people driven or person driven as far as doing things is concerned, but more SLA driven. Now, is that also, it's difficult for organizations to get that balance right. So if we say that, yes, I'm oriented to people, I might let my SLAs and my task orientation drop, as against my person orientation, which rises or takes dominance in that sense. So where is my organization culture able to find a balance between orientation to people versus orientation to the task? And no, easier said than done, but that is where the real challenge is, to make sure that there is a positive employee experience in the processes that HR runs. The next one is the readiness aspect of this. And here, like I've said, the devil is in the details. We need to be prepared for exceptions. And by readiness, what do I mean? I mean, it has a bearing in terms of the design aspect of this, but being ready from a data point of view, being ready from an understanding of what do my people need to make them productive or to make them effective. That is the question that needs to be asked. And are we ready with answers, in dealing with those answers, in accepting those answers, and in preparing for exceptions that might occur along the way? So that is where it comes in. So readiness, that am I ready to have a smoothest hiring process? Am I ready to have a very short but effective performance evaluation process? Am I ready and clear and transparent with how my compensation is done? So there are different aspects of readiness in terms of preparing for readiness and making sure that we have things lined up so that we are able to execute effectively as far as employee experience is concerned. We come to the design aspect of it. Now, how do you design for employee experience? The design aspect is ultimately, there's an element of philosophy that you need to examine for yourselves as an organization. What do I want, or what do I as an organization consider to be a positive employee experience? Now, for some people, it could be that I should be able to recruit the best and pay. If that's your philosophy, design your process and your policies according to that philosophy. Whereas for others, if it is, let's say, I will, I might recruit in a certain way, but I will make sure that my people are skilled and exceptionally skilled for any kind of contingency that the market throws at us. That's your philosophy. Design your employee experience according to that philosophy. So that's where the design element comes in. How are we prepared to the philosophy that the organization believes that I need to effectively treat my people? That is the question that we need to look at. And then we come to our favorite, hobby horse for a lot of us. Through technology, how do we enable scale in people's experience? How do we enable control and monitoring by the managers or by the functional or departmental heads? And how do we enable outcomes that will meet and impact the business, is what we need to look at from a technology standpoint. And the last but not the least is the execution of all of this. So if we've got our leadership awareness right, and commitment right, if we've got our culture oriented towards people and balancing people and task, if we've got an understanding of what an employee needs to make him or her effective, and we exceptions, if we've defined and designed with the philosophy that what do I need so that my people are most effective, and I have the right technology which will enable control, scale, etc., I need to enable execution. And Execution for what? Execution so that the predictability of outcomes is there. If I have to design a policy, and if I have done my preparation of all the 5 steps well, if I have to then execute the policy, am I getting the outcome that I wanted in the first place, and am I getting it right for every instance of where that benefit, or that policy or that benefit has been implemented for the people. So if 1,000 people have availed of that benefit, have 99.9% of those people experienced the policy and that benefit in a consistent manner. So is my outcome that predictable? Is my generation of data meeting the analytics that I want to derive as a result of that, and which will help me to align to back to my design in terms of the philosophy and in terms of the process? And how am I able to therefore adjust the process based on the analytics that I will do? So often, when we are working with employee experience, what happens is we miss out one or many of these steps, and as a result of that, the experience becomes skewed. So, for example, if my culture is not giving me a balance of orientation to people or orientation to task, I might be extremely SLA driven, and therefore I might become extremely clinical in my implementation of certain policies, but I might forget that there are absolutely genuine exceptions. Maybe somebody was not able to fill up their performance appraisal on time because their mother was suffering from cancer and had to be hospitalized. How do you deal with that? So that is where the balance needs to be struck in. So how does the employee experience in those instances will go a long way in making sure the commitment of the employee is towards the organization, and therefore that incremental effort is there for a better output that the individual and therefore the organization is able to get as a result of that. So these are some of the conceptual anchors around this. I'm happy to now take questions and maybe share some stories and experiences of how I've experienced this as a both as an employee and as a practitioner in my past organization.
Definitely, Rajesh. I'm sure that all our audience members are actually excited to learn from your experience. And the part that you shared about how you have shed light on the different types of gaps that are existing while designing this employee experience journey. Just to set off the context, I would actually like to ask you one question. You started off by saying that employee experience is now being considered akin to customer experience. So your
Right.
employee is the customer. And I think that sets a wonderful context for the entire discussion. So basically, customer experience is usually a critical parameter of a great brand. So no matter which organization you're in, the client experience is always at the forefront. So now, how do you think that the mindset can be applied similarly to the employee experience bit, where do you think that today employee experience too is seen as a critical dimension to bringing that to becoming a great brand? So it's not just about employer branding, but also about in general achieving those business goals and reaching that level of organizational clarity, where customer experience and employee experience become the bedrock. So how would
Yeah.
you suggest that HR leaders do that?
Okay. A short answer is look at Glassdoor. uh, why did Glassdoor exist? Not because people couldn't find portals for jobs or openings and things like that, but Glassdoor meets a very unique need in terms of that. Look, if I'm ultimately going to apply to an organization, I need to know to some degree what that organization is all about and how have people experienced that organization. So if we are saying that definitely, and which is true, that there are customer reviews which go out on social media nowadays, and which drives or which creates a perception of customer experience. Well, uh, you have a similar principle coming in from an employee standpoint, and not just Glassdoor, but I think a lot of other similar sites come up to say that, look, how is it that we are capturing the voice of the employee who has experienced or who has been part of an organization and would like to share their thoughts and experiences.
That's very true. So when you look at reviews for any particular product or anything, you always look at reviews. So why not when you are actually joining a company and making a career decision? So that I think you put that very well. So talking about your own experiences in your career, you've worked in different industries. So over the years, what kind of trends have you seen that have stood out for you, and observed kind of this journey from being called employee satisfaction to now becoming a whole employee experience division, if you will?
Yeah. So I think the two big shifts that I have experienced over the last maybe 15, 20 years or so is actually the realization that the human needs to come back as in human resources. And I don't mean this as a cliched statement in any way at all, but a lot of change has been towards making sure that the HR community is actually focusing on what the employee needs are, genuinely so, and then being able to craft policies, craft benefits according to those needs as such. So it's I think just a simply a greater sensitivity to the fact that we have different kinds of people in our lives, and how do I ensure that those people are treated the best while they are here. So that's one mindset shift which has happened over the last maybe 10 to 15 years. But the second one, perhaps more importantly, is of course technology. uh, in a lot of ways, technology has enabled us to scale and reach the last mile employee, which in earlier times without technology was extremely difficult and extremely rare. So today, right from a simple, your broadcast of maybe your top leadership that goes out, or an all hands meet which can be run globally across the organization, which may be spread in over 30, 40, 50, 80 countries, can be done very seamlessly, very effectively, and very quickly. So right from there, that builds a greater connect of the employee, and they are able to then be more open, ask more questions, and connect with people with whom they would probably not have had in a technology less environment. Similarly, purely from the point of view of data information management, a lot of things are now done in a self-service mode. To me, that has really kind of gone and put the employee front and center and said, look, you are responsible for a lot of the things which you have told us about yourself. You are responsible for updating your profile. You are responsible for the information that you give us so that we are able to service you better. Even right down to your performance appraisal process, where much before technology came in. Um, and I remember doing that. My manager would just tell me at the end of the year what was my increment and what was my, increase that I got, and what was my performance bonus. There was no employee input into telling how your performance has been, or how your year has been. Well, last 15, 18 years or so, there is very decidedly marked a shift on that. And even before that, I was privileged to work with organizations that actually took that into cognizance right at the beginning of my career, where we were asked to give our inputs in terms of what we thought our performance was, where it was not happening in all our organizations across the board. So,
Very
so
true.
the fact of putting the employee at the front and center of all HR processes and technology has really taken this whole dimension of employee experience to a certain level.
That's very true, and you speak of how the employee has been brought to the front and center of kind of creating their own experience and having a say in how their career journey is. So there is a question from Nehal, one of our audience members, and she has asked, employee experience also determines the employee engagement level. However, the primary challenge is to cater to the interests of different kinds of employees. And given that we are in such a diverse workforce at this point, you have the gig economy impacting the way the work happens, and you have the millennials coming in, and you have a multi-generational workforce. So I think Nehal points out to that diversity, and is asking the question about how do we solve this problem of catering to these different interests. And I think you touched upon it in a little bit in your presentation. So if you
Yeah.
could just expand on it a little.
Sure. And Nehal, thank you. This is a good question. Yes, Valerie, employee diversity, and diversity, I don't mean purely from a gender point of view, but definitely diversity in terms of abilities, diversity from a point of view of age. All of those factors need to be taken in. So to answer Nehal, it's in the way I would look at it is in two parts. First and foremost, look at data. Look at data in terms of how what is your demographic mix first. Start with that. What is your gender mix? And starting with that, you can then say, or you can then ask people, what would be the best things that we can do for this kind of a demographic mix which is there. Now, it also comes back to the second part of your question that, if I try to be all things to everybody, I might end up being nothing to nobody, all put together. So, yes, you need to be very aware that fragmenting yourself or spreading yourself too thin is not going to help in any way. So, you need to look at which is your most significant population from a demographic perspective, and see how you're able to meet those needs. And I go back to one of the aspects, in my presentation, which I spoke about managing exceptions. So what are those exceptions which you are willing to then consider, and those exceptions which you are not willing to consider? So to a certain extent, you will have to prioritize that in terms of how you are going to be able to treat your employees. Now, this doesn't mean that you ignore a certain population. No, you don't ignore them, but you will have to focus your attention, your money, your benefits, your policies, your efforts, etc., on that largest chunk of people who you consider from a demographic or from a profile standpoint the most effective and the most necessary in your organization.
Okay. So that would be one way to approach that, and kind of tackle the challenge of spreading
Yeah,
yourself too thin. And I think you said it wonderfully that you can't be everything to everyone.
correct.
So I think that is very important to keep in mind. When as HR leaders, as business leaders, or even as managers, when we are designing teams or catering to our teams. So actually, we were talking about your experience a little bit, and kind of referring to Tata Motors a little bit. So Pallavi has asked, kind of what is how maybe you could shed a little bit of light on the company's strategy behind offering a great employee experience throughout the different touch points, throughout the different moments of truth, as you mentioned earlier. So, can you maybe share one or two practices that have stood out for you at Tata Motors?
Uh, okay, so is this the Pallavi's question is what is the sensitization program to increase the human element in Tata Motors?
Yes, yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that part. So that is also a part of her question, where she's asking the increasing the human element in Tata Motors
Okay.
related to the sensitization program.
Yeah. Okay, so the two parts to this answer. Um, to a certain extent, it is from an HR standpoint, right from the time I've been with Tata Motors maybe for about 8 years now, little over 8 years. Um, what we consistently do and what we consistently believe is that people should be treated right. We have that encoded in enshrined in part of our value system, in part of our behaviors that we are expected to demonstrate both on the job itself. And also in our connect with the Tata group, there is, and I'm sure there are other colleagues of mine from different Tata companies, maybe who are also on this, in the audience. We have what is known as the Tata Code of Conduct. So there it is very clearly that the employee is at the center of things. So whether it is interaction with colleagues, whether it is interaction with suppliers, whether it is interaction with managers, all of our values, our behaviors are geared towards making sure that we treat people as people. And that is the fundamental aspect of this. What we definitely also do is conduct a lot of programs and awareness sessions um, for our people managers. In fact, just this year we are doing a lot in terms of making people managers aware, and we've been doing this maybe over the last 3 years or so, sensitizing people managers about what constitutes good feedback. How is it that you can give good feedback? What constitutes a good review? How is it that you can constructively hold performance appraisals? What kind of skills from a coaching standpoint do you need to be able to interact with your employees, whether it is on a one-on-one discussion or whether it is in sync? And we've been doing that over the last 6, 7, 8 years, very, very, very consistently in different ways. What I can say. So, and I think that also feeds into a certain extent into Rajita's question. How
Yes.
can managers create a positive employee experience where there is a thin line between people and task orientation? So absolutely, Rajita, very, very valid point. And sometimes, I as a manager may have made mistakes and become far too task oriented than I should have been, or
Mhm.
far too people oriented than I should have, when I should have been focusing on the task. So yes, that's very valid. But uh, what can managers do? Well, the manager first and foremost has to understand that it is people that they are dealing with, and they don't have to work out of an element of fear or, uh, you know, d- give it saying that okay, these are my people, I will be, or be overprotective about them in that sense. So there is a balance in that sense, and the managers will have to be taught to walk that fine line and work out that balance between task and thing.
Very true. So I think when we talk about striking that balance, that brings us to Ketan's question about how to establish a linkage between employee experience and business outcome. So that kind of connection, how do you suggest that HR leaders can help establish that?
Okay. So we'll have to go back in history a bit, actually, not too far back, but I don't know if people in the audience would remember a gentleman called Vineet Nair, who was with HCL. He wrote a book called Employee First, Customer Second. And this was back in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. People can Google it and probably, find out quicker than I finish talking about it. But uh, that created a ruckus back in the day, because at that was the time where every consultant worth his name and his or her salt was going around town saying that customer first, customer first, etc., etc. And here was a person who took a very, very radical approach and said employee first, customer second. His basic premise, if I can boil it down in the interest of time, is if you treat your people right, your people will treat your customers right. So
Yes.
that is the connect that I would want, in that sense, to ask. I think whether it is Mohan or somebody else who asked about the
Ketan had asked
financial
this
benefit.
question. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the connect. You treat your people right, your people will treat your customers right, your people will treat the vendors right. So that's the connect that you need to make. And probably it's a good time to go back and have a look at that book and see what Vineet Nair had to say then. I'm quite sure it holds true even now.
Yes, yes. And now it has come up as a customer experience journey and employee experience
Right.
journey. So definitely it would be good to look back and revise on that concept. So which I would like to take Mohan's question next. which is in organizations where there are, maybe financial challenges, maybe there is, you know, companies are going through their own sets of, ups and downs. So where any type of investment or on people might be a concern, what are some of the ways in which such companies, such leaders can, focus on creating better people experiences? Because as we just established earlier, that employees come first, whether your company is going through a success period or maybe a little bit of a downturn. So
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great question again, Mohan. Thank you. Um, yeah. Look, creating a good employee experience is not about throwing money at people. It's not about. It's not always about having a fancy a pool table and gym area and sitting area and things like that in your office. Employee experience, and if you looked at my second slide, is about those touch points in the journey that the employee experiences along the way while they are in the organization. So, are we treating our people right in the hiring stage? Are we onboarding them effectively and quickly? Are we making sure that they are treated? Are they being sent for the right training programs? Are they being told why that training is essential for them? Are there reviews and discussions being held on time and are being effective? All of these points are also extremely important from an employee engagement and an employee experience point of view. Tell me, a hypothetical question, I'm sure the group knows the answer. Would an employee be happy if during the review discussion, the manager was fiddling around on their mobile and doing his or her emails? Obviously not. So, can a positive review happen just by following those simple processes that we all, that as HR professionals, are predominantly there in most organizations? So, it is not about money, it is about making sure that people are treated right in every step of the way along the life cycle that they are.
Okay. So we have another question about, about the employee feedback and, involving employees in their own experience. So Mithun has asked, what do you suggest that employers should do in order to improve this set of, employee feedback generation systems? Because, sometimes internal surveys, how much ever the HR might try to get a pulse on what's happening, the participation levels in these surveys are always, a question mark, are always challenging and not that encouraging. So any other suggestion on that, how to get the employee pulse?
Yeah, great question, Mithun. Just today morning, I was responding to a couple of emails on some of the internal surveys that we take actually. So yes, from my current role responsibility, where I look after HR shared services, this is something that we definitely conduct for. So for every transaction that set of employees undergo, every quarter we roll out a satisfaction survey with our services, and this is only for shared services largely. So that's one area we are working on. We get a certain degree of responses which statistically are correct, but my point to the team was, let's focus on the absolute scores. Let's look at what the people are saying about us. That is important. So, from an HR shared services point of view, it's quite straightforward that you've raised a request for a certain service. We've responded in a certain way. How did you find that interaction? And that's what we gather information on. You will be, some of you may be surprised to know that last year, and or was it year before last also, we conducted a simple survey after the performance review process was complete, where we asked every employee and their manager, how did process. So was a discussion held on time? Was there a certain amount of time that was given to those discussions? Was the quality of feedback suitable? Did they actually benefit, get clarity in terms of where they are doing well and not doing well on that? So simple 4 or 5 question survey, which we rolled out embedded in our performance appraisal tool, which went out to the manager to the employee before they saw their performance feedback. So that helped us get an indicator whether the process is working and whether there were any tweaks which were required or not required as a result of that. So yes, we do conduct these periodic surveys, feedback mechanisms, and for participation levels, you don't have to worry about it. Look at it being on the right statistical side. It's fine that even on a base of certain look at it from a statistical correlation point of view. To what degree of certainty do you want the responses that you're getting to mirror those of the population, and to what level of error are you comfortable with? So that's the way I would look at it.
I think you've answered Pooja's question as well, where she's asking about how are you measuring the employee experience in
Yeah,
Tata Motors. So I think that question has already been answered. So I
yeah.
would
Just
just,
if I can
if,
just ask one point on that to clarify
yes,
that, Pooja, we don't measure employee experience as employee experience per se as a holistic thing. We measure it along the way in different components of our thing. So we take a post hire survey, we do a post appraisal survey, we do a post like I said in the shared services quarterly feedback survey. So it's at different touch points, but one good thought is, yeah, can we aggregate all of that together and do some analytics? So you've got me thinking, so thank you very much for that.
okay. Perfect. So I think we have time for maybe just one last question. So if we can just talk about, oh, we just got we have a lot of questions coming in. I think Rajesh, you might have to connect with them offline
Yeah,
later
yeah,
on.
happily. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter, so that's fine.
Okay,
um,
perfect. So maybe we can just have one last question. So basically, it's Momita is asking about the agile approach when we are working on an employee experience project. So she's actually asking about some of the roadblocks that may have come your way, that you've identified that okay, these are some of the challenges that have come that are pretty commonly faced by HR leaders, and how what is your way to ensure that the list of processes required stays focused, and it's kind of a proper approach when everything is so changing dynamically.
yeah.
So how did you prioritize and align those change requests in the employee life cycle?
By being a little ruthless, actually. I mean, you have to go back and tell HR or tell the business that, look, we can't do everything at the same time. There are things that we can do, which we will do, and there are things which we can then defer and do it maybe 3 months later, 5 months later, or what have you. So I'm not too sure what the project is all about, Momita, but some of the blockers that might come your way in terms of employee experiences, one, definitely culture, uh, and an orientation towards SLAs. So can I service a certain request in a certain time? Now, is that the expectation? And if so, how are you going to meet that expectation? So that is one. Second is, how are you going to use technology? So not no technology is complete in and of itself. So you might have to see which is the best tool that I can use for the meeting the ends of the goals of the project that you have taken on. And yeah, to stay focused, of course, shortlist things that you will be working on, but inform the business or inform the larger HR community that to begin with, these are the 5 priorities. Then we will take on the next three, so on and so forth.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this much time. So, if there is any closing remark, Rajesh, that you would like to add,
No, I think it's been a wonderful experience. Like I said, I've also picked up a couple of cues on where I could go back and look at some aspects of improving the experience at back in my organization. Just very quickly, I would leave my LinkedIn and Twitter handle for people in case they want to kind of connect with me. Uh, So that's that. I've not put this into a screen saver mode. Sorry, presentation mode, but that's me.
Yes, we can.
So on LinkedIn, of course, it's professional. Twitter is all things you will get from there. I mean, my cricket following and my football following, and all things over here. So that's me as a person, and this is me as a professional. There's not too much of a difference between the two, really, assure.
Well, thank you so much, Rajesh. It has been wonderful to get the chance to talk to you and actually deep dive into this large topic of employee experience and addressing all these different gaps. So, with that, I would like to thank Rajesh for giving us your time today, and I would also like to thank SAP for being our partners for this webcast. And I would also like to thank all the audience members for being so participative and asking us so many different questions. So thank you, everyone. And on behalf of People Matters and SAP and Rajesh, I would like to wish you all a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice weekend.